Good morning, Americans. This is your puppet alien and Boom Moose Bubba here on the morning of Friday, June 26, 2020. TGIF. And today, I want to answer. Boy, I hit a nerve on one of my broadcasts earlier when I was saying about the Emancipation Proclamation and African Americans. Whew, did I get them? What do you mean you're talking? You don't talking through your the rear end, and you're talking through this, and you're talking through that, and you're not black. One guy, Mr. Rishon Davidson, he didn't say where he was from, but he said, "Hello, alien. I'm an African American, and I have to apologize for my people because you were right. I researched the Emancipation Proclamation, and I understand where you're coming from. I wish my people would understand that instead of going out there and protesting." So to Mr. Davidson, I tip my hat. And let me tell you, African Americans and everybody else that'll listen to this video, proclamations by the presidential proclamations are nothing but paper, except if you do them with an executive order, okay? And then they got teeth. But then you got the law of unintended consequences. And that's what happened to you guys in the Emancipation Proclamation. So let me do two proclamations that happened 100 years apart and the disaster that it cost both of them. For you African Americans, President Lincoln had a bad 1862. The Union was losing. Terrible. Antietam, Shiloh, the Second Battle of Manassas. Oh, yeah. They were just losing people left and right. You were, when he wrote the Declaration, you had about 7 months to go before Gettysburg and the turnaround of the war. But he didn't know that at the time. Okay? So he did his Emancipation Proclamation and let it out in January of 1863. And of course, it had no teeth because you were still in the war. And even when the war ended in 1865 and he got assassinated, he couldn't do nothing about the Emancipation Proclamation. And then the radical Republicans had a political end to damage the South and really stick it to them. So they did. They gave you all the rights that you wanted. They didn't know what you were going to do with them and how that was going to affect the nation. They figured that you guys would stay in the South, and the South would deal with it. That's why they passed all those amendments. It wasn't because of you. Really? And as you know, disaster happened when they wanted to win the election in 1876, and then Democrats said, "Oh, we got a chance to get you back." So they got the South back, and the Jim Crow laws got people in the Congress, and those Jim Crow laws became segregation, and you know the disaster there. So really, those amendments that were passed in the 1860s meant nothing to you African Americans. So this is why you got this throat and chip on your shoulder, which you should throw this chip out. It's about time to throw it away and start anew here. Now, 100 years later, in 1963, President John F. Kennedy in January did a proclamation with an executive order to this one. This one had teeth. Concerning my country of Panama, that the Panamanian flag should be flown equal to the Americans, side by side. Same height, same thing. Well, the governor of the Canal Zone at the time, his name was Fleming, didn't like that. The Zonians didn't like that. And as you know, President Kennedy was assassinated in November of 1863. In December of 1863, the governor of the Canal Zone said, "Hell, if we can't fly our flags, you can't fly yours." So he took every flag, American and Panamanian, down. That irked the Zonians. So the Zonians in January 1964 and their students in the school, Balboa High School, which I went to later, a decade later, put up the American flag on the flagpole. And that got to the students of the Institute of Panama, the rival school to the Canal Zone, which had been rivals all for this time. And they were rivals when I went to school. And they decided to go across the border with the Panamanian flag. So they crossed the border. And you got to remember the border at the time, they used to call it the Berlin Wall of the Western Hemisphere because the United States had this huge fence all around this avenue called the 4th of July Avenue. That was a dividing line between Panama City and the Canal Zone. And the fence was huge. I mean, it was like President Trump's border wall here today. So they went over there, and they had informed the Canal Zone police and the administration they were going to do that. The Canal Zone police gave them permission. They went over there, did it, and hell ensued. Started a riot by the Zonians. They started beating up the kids. And all of a sudden the police came in, and shooting started. And well, a lot of people got killed on both sides over a stupid flag and a proclamation by a president that his underlings, the governor of the Canal Zone, and he was flying to Washington at the time, so he wasn't even there. So the heat fell on the Lieutenant Governor Parker, which led a good thing to get this thing diffused between him and the president of Panama, even though there was diplomatic relations breakdown. There was a rupture in the diplomatic relations between the two countries for 4 months. But they still defended U.S. property. So you see what I mean, African Americans? Proclamations have a disastrous effect. And you can't have the chip on their shoulders. Does my country have the chip on their shoulders? No. And what they call the Avenue of the Martyrs, which is what they changed the name of the 4th of July Avenue. And every January 9th, like this year for 2020, it's not called the Day of the Martyrs, it's called Sovereignty Day. Because that's the day that the Panamanians started to get sovereignty back. You don't understand that because you've never been there. But I understand where you guys come from because I've been through disintegration, segregation, and everything. I grew up with it. From Panama and the Americans in the zone. So I understand where you're coming from, African Americans, more than you know. But you got to change your way of thinking like we did. Otherwise, you'll be having a hatred that you can't live with. This is your favorite alien, and boom, Moose Baba. Good day.